the difference now between what we're going to see here is there's no longer just a period of 2 pi. So that's the only new thing from this. Everything else you're going to do the same as what we just got finished covering. Okay, so when I start, I'm going to find my max and min. What's my total distance here? 12, which means, and I can even see from the point that I provided you, it's on the midline here. But that should make sense. Half of 12 is 6, so there's my amplitude. And then this midline is going to be 6 up or 6 down from my max and min. So I have my equation y equals -4. All right, so when I set up my function, which again it asked me to put it in terms of f of x, is equal to, my amplitude is 6. I'm leaving a space for the minus in case I need it. And now, with my point right here, this is going to help me determine which trig ratio I want to use. Okay, because if a point's on the midline, I'm going to use my sine function. If the point's on the extreme, max or min, I'm going to use cosine. Because if you tried to find where the cosines were, you'd maybe see one here at 3 pi over 4, but this one doesn't line up. By me giving you one point, that point's going to specifically line up with a point that you see on here. Okay, so I'm going to use the sine function based on the point being given on the midline. Okay, I don't know what's going to happen inside, but I do know my vertical shift is down 4, and so I can fill in this portion of it. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to figure out the period. Okay, there's 2 ways you can figure out the period. We talked about this already. One way is you can see how long it takes for something to repeat. So if I tried to go from here, 5 pi over 4, I get all the way here and it repeats. But when I look here, this doesn't match up with the tick marks. And so there's a second way that you can find the period, and that is designate a total distance of 2 pi and see how many rotations of that oscillation occur within that. So the repetitions, if I go up from here to 2 pi, what would be the end of 2 pi from 5 pi over 4? -3 pi over 4, right? So if I look through this total distance of 2 pi, and then I count how many full rotations happen within that. So if I go, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. So it rotates, or it repeats itself 3 times within that 2 pi distance. And so that gives me my period. My period's going to be 2 pi over 3. Okay, we went through some problems like this yesterday's lesson. Here's where it's going to apply. Because what I know is my period is equal to 2 pi over b, okay, where the absolute value of b, where b is my multiplier in front of x. So if I look at this and I set it up as my period is 2 pi over 3, what does b have to equal? 3. So that's my multiplier in front of x. Okay, and now, instead of just putting it in the term x, I'm going to put it as a factor out front, because now I can account for my shift just inside this inner set of parentheses. So what is my shift? Well, I'm going to use the shift that's provided for me. So I can tell this shifted to the right how many units? There's no mistaking where that given point was. So 5 pi over 4, so I'm shifting x minus 5 pi over 4. And then the last thing you have to do is to figure out, do I need a minus in front or no? So when I look from here, so starting at that given point that I shifted to, is this a positive sine function or a negative sine function? Starts to go up, so that is positive. So this would be my equation. And I can leave it like that. You don't have to distribute the 3 through. You can if you want. And you could put 6 times sine of 3x minus 15 pi over 4. Okay, but you can also just leave it exactly as it is. Now, you could have also shifted it back to this point, the end of your 2 pi. Okay, so we could have also said here f of x is equal to 6 times sine of, we still have 3 times x minus would be a slightly different value. And so if we shifted to the left, a negative pi or 3 pi over 4, this would be the other alternate formula that you can use that represents here. Again, you can see if you shifted it to the left, 1 full period demonstrates that we're, again, going in the positive direction with our sign, so we leave the number in front as a positive. Question? I just do it because it's easier to see what the horizontal shift is in that factored form than if it's out of the factored form. Like if you had 3x minus 15 pi over 4, so this would be the same thing, right? To talk through this, we have our maximum and our minimums are at 4 and negative 6. So if we look at the total distance between those is 10. We cut that in half, and that's our amplitude, 5. And when we see that go 5 up from here or down from here, and I get my midline is going to pass through at y equals negative 1. So right now I have that portion of my function. F of x is equal to my amplitude 5. Again, I leave a space in case I'm going to be dealing with a negative. Because the point was given on the extreme, I'm going to use cosine as my function. I don't know what's going to happen inside yet, but I do know that I'm going to get a minus 1 for my vertical shift on the outside. So this is what I can fill in here so far. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I need to figure out what the period is. So for me, if I can't tell one complete rotation here, so if I look, here's 1 period, right? Well, I can't really tell, like right here, this isn't necessarily at pi, so I don't know what that is. So what I'm going to do to guarantee I have the right value is I'm going to move 2 pi, a total of 2 pi. So from 5 pi over 4, I can get to 2 pi by going all the way over to negative 3 pi over 4, correct? So this is one whole distance of 2 pi. And so what I'm going to then do is see how many repetitions of this pattern, again, I'm using cosine, so how many repetitions of the cosine pattern occur between or within this 2 pi region. So here I see it goes, again, it's from minimum to minimum. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and so that gives me what my total period is. And remember, the period is equal to 2 pi for cosine and sine, equal to 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. And so if I have 2 pi over 9, then what is my b value? 9. So that's my multiplier in front of the x. And then I'm going to leave my x as its own factor here so I can see what the horizontal shift is. And so I'm going to use the one that was provided to me. I saw that that given point was at 5 pi over 4 to the right. So I'm going to put negative 5 pi over 4, and that would be my function. Okay, now, I could have also used the place where I ended my 2 pi for my calculation. So I could have also said, now I'm not quite done yet, so hang on just a second. Oops. Right, so when I look at here, because my 1 period goes from here to here, okay, is that representing a positive cosine or a negative cosine? Start at a minimum. Okay, that's not the regular cosine, it's the negative. So my answer is going to be a negative in front. Okay, and so if my other option for writing it would have been to shift this direction over here to this point, and if I use that, the shift would have been minus a negative 3 pi over 4. So these would be the two ways that I would enter my answer for that problem.